Welcome along to Critical Disability Studies at Manchester Metropolitan University. Today we have Professor Alan Roulstone with us. Northumbria University, Alan.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. This is part of our disCOVER series where we're trying to talk, or not trying, we are talking to activists, researchers, key people involved in disability studies and disability politics about some of the kind of key challenges. So can I ask you, Alan, what you think are some of the kind of key issues facing disabled people that we as disability studies community should be focusing upon?
Yeah, the category of disability has always been a contentious one, and the position of disabled people in terms of policy and access to the things they need has always been rather an unstable one. It's unlike race or gender, it's an area that instability can lead to the state shifting the boundaries and barriers as to who counts as disabled or not. And I think that currently across certainly the developed world, so-called, is leaving a number of disabled people wondering whether or not they will continue to get services, whether they will be redefined out of the category of disabled people. I think Deborah Stone's work on the disabled state and the way in which states and policies shift the category of disability is more relevant now than I think since she wrote it. The idea that you can be told that you're not disabled can leave you in some significant jeopardy, particularly if the emphasis in many minority world contexts is to talk about work and paid work as the key objective for disabled people who are seen to be able to work. But for many of those people, the discussion of work is an abstract one, because the barriers to the labour market for them have proven to be very significant. Now, in the absence of support into paid work, the discussions about being taken out of the category of disability leaves some people in significant jeopardy in terms of the support that they might need. Poverty, I think, will become an increasingly big issue for disabled people.
Can you give me, can you give me an example then of that's perhaps happening now in the British context of a case where a disabled person is actually being shifted out of that disability category?
Yeah. Well, currently there's up to 1 million people who the government are trying to move off incapacity benefit, what's being moving towards employment and support allowance. And a small number of people will go onto the support category and will be deemed to be supportable. Which, by the way, in itself is a problematic area, because there will be little attention paid to trying to give people with quite significant impairments opportunities. So the link will be reaffirmed between significant impairment and not having a broad range of social opportunities, which in itself I think is dangerous. But for those people that are in a middle group and in the group which is perceived to be closest to the labour market, they will live in a constant sort of netherworld between opportunity and being forced to take on opportunities and be supported. And they will be constantly reviewed under the employment support allowance regulations. That's begun already. There's a number of people, disabled people out there, who are significant concern that they'll no longer get the additional amounts of money that disabled people get through incapacity benefits. You've got, in a couple of years' time, the disability living allowance will be reviewed for all claimants, which will affect 2.5 million people. And that, significantly, the government has said it wants to move, again, a similar amount, about 1 million people, for disability living allowance. The assumption for both those groups, incapacity benefit and the disability living allowance, is that somehow those people were incorrectly put onto those benefits. And there's a sort of retrospective revisiting of that to sort of change, in my view, to shift the goalposts in favour of a smaller claimant group. So you end up with a position where no one gains. You've got the group who is being supported, who actually are in a sort of confirmed status of being away from economic opportunities, and those that are in the other two categories living in this strange sort of half world of not knowing whether or not they are classified as genuinely disabled, being encouraged to go for jobs, but actually in the absence of jobs they have this strange paradoxical situation of not fitting into normal categories or disabled categories.
Because when you're talking, I'm reminded of the Paul Aberley work around sociology of impairment, and that, you know, is that, have we got a kind of, if you like, a worked example here of the socially constructed nature of impairment that's now occurring in relation to the individual, the state and work.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that for some time now I've been thinking about, I think, the problem of both the state having its own sponsored doctors, for example, through Disability Department for Work and Pensions, and also I'm concerned that in a sort of extreme version of the social model, in denying impairment, would leave open the terrain for really rather harmful assessments of impairment, which leave people with impairments completely without any kind of support in terms of verification. And in some ways, the sort of medical model discussion about the role of doctors, I think, has confused issues of medicalisation versus medical support.
Right.
Actually, many disabled people, when you talk to them, will say, actually, no, my own GP or consultant are extremely helpful.
Right.
In telling me and telling it how it is, and that has helped them to get various forms of social support. Now, I think the inadvertent effect of misinterpretation of the medical model to mean any medical intervention leaves people with impairments completely without that validity, and it is allowed in, I think, the Department for Work and Pensions approaches to medical assessment to come in, as I see it, and I'm happy to go on record as saying, as a politicised form of assessment. And so I think academically, we need to be increasingly thoughtful about how disabled people construct the relationship between impairment, how they see it, and how they see that relationship with barriers.
So it just got me thinking then around the role of the doctor. I mean, there's a famous work by Vic Finkelstein around professionals allied to medicine and professionals allied to the community. But perhaps what you're suggesting is that maybe disabled people are actually pointed to the fact that in some cases a good GP couldn't be a good professional allied to their community. Will that be a fair?
Yeah, they are. I mean, I would also say alongside that, if you like industrialised medicine, if you're getting significant support, your body is fragmented within an industrialised medical system. But I think what the general practitioner can do is to pull together and kind of reintegrate a kind of perception of your impairment. And someone has to, at the end of the day, arbitrate on these matters. Doctors don't have an easy job in doing that. I'd certainly agree with Vic that doctors have played a part in the medicalisation process. Whether, there's a debate to be had, isn't there, about whether or not they were willingly wanting to be part of that.
That's interesting.
But certainly, general practitioners, in my view, should continue to have a role alongside other professionals. And I think oriented towards the community for me isn't just about where you're situated in the community, it's about understanding disabled people's lives in their broader context. So I think again, it comes back to saying about misunderstanding, confusing medicalisation with medical roles.
Right.
There is no other profession that can say whether or not your impairment is within certain parameters and what your likely needs are. And what I agree with Vic on is that we can easily conflate health with impairment, and I think those discussions need to continue. I still don't think we have an especially nuanced view of some of these things, and I think sometimes we have a tendency to talk past each other. That where if you dare to talk about the role of medicine, it will be seen as discussion of medicalisation. So clearly it's not, and if you take away medical role without something to take its place, particularly general practitioners, you end up with a void into which I think much more politicised statutory views will come in, and I think risk distorting impairment further.
Alan, thank you very much.